So thank you for taking time to talk to us. I know you've been on a whirlwind of promoting the film, Venice. I want to just dive into that. So Residue was named honorable mention, and it was an Audience Best Award. You guys won an Audience Best Award at the Slamdance in the beginning of the year in Utah. And then you guys just debuted internationally recently at the Venice Film Festival. Merawi, did you expect the audience internationally to get the film or to understand the film?
I can't say that I was even thinking about that, and thinking of it, or even when we went out, I don't know how much time I spent on it. My focus has always been, I've always been hyper focused on just making sure that DC gets the film, and I think that, I felt that if I could hit that target, everything else would just fall where it will, and I would have achieved, my goal. But yeah, I think that what has happened is that because it's so specific to, this particular, place and time, which I feel like I know so well, I think that it has kind of really developed, kind of this universality to it, where I think, where people can kind of relate to, the very kind of specific, details of, kind of this existence of everyday people trying to survive against all odds, which I think
And I think any neighborhood in United States could relate to it, right? I mean, it's a very relatable story. So obviously it's based and shown and filmed and shot in DC, but I feel like anybody in any neighborhood or any hood across the country could, especially in the United States, could relate to it. Is this a love letter to DC?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm very proud of my city. I think that it's imperfect in many ways, and that's, every turn the film is kind of making sure that point is clear that DC comes with the good and the bad at all times, and I think that despite that, I value my identity as a DC native, above all else, and I think that if you yes, but at the same time, I think that to me, my greatest joy would be if it catches like wildfire to other cities around the country, other Black cities around the country, like Brooklyn, which is going through a harrowing gentrification experience. It's horrifying to see what happened there. Oakland, San Francisco, all these other places. I think that Black people in those places feel kindred to me, and I believe that Black DC culture will feel kindred to them. I think that it's a way to tie these places together. Hopefully.
Well, definitely, it's making the waves. People are talking about the film. People are ready, especially your peers and your people in DC. There's this hashtag that has been circulating. I think Array started the hashtag, and it's the hood is still ours. It's an unspoken theme in the film, gentrification, right? You see it all throughout the film, but it's never mentioned. The word gentrification, I don't believe, is mentioned in the film. How do we fight back against gentrification in our communities?
Yeah, I mean, one, you're right. The film doesn't get into it because, like I've been saying, gentrification is a symptom of the larger, issue of Black powerlessness in America and around the world. And I think that you take that as the first step, which is, I think, what the film tries to establish, that we suffer under gentrification equally as we do, police brutality, this whole war on drugs, bullshit. Sorry, excuse my French, but and I think that it comes, it's all, our battle against white supremacy, period. I think that I don't distinguish between the different types of white supremacy. In my opinion, it's just the battle that we have to fight. So I think that's the thing that the film tries to speak on. In a technical sense, in terms of how we do it, I think that one, I had to point you to people who are more educated and have been in the game longer than me. I can tell you from my own understanding, gentrification could never happen without a city, politicians in place who greenlight this type of development, this type of, kind of uncontrolled, running the city like a corporation, which, there's a book called How to Kill a City, which gets into it real good. This broad, the broad or high level, idea of how gentrification is started and is intensified in the stages that it goes through. Ultimately, the idea is that we can't do anything on our own. You see kind of what happens with Jay, but I think that as communities, as communities intent on repair and protection of our own, I think that we have a lot more power, especially once we recognize that every Black city in the country is going through this. And after that, every poor and working class person is subject to this kind of thing.
Residue is a lot like your story. So it follows Jay. He returns to DC from school from California. You went to USC, to a neighborhood that he's unfamiliar with. Well, it's changed in a lot of ways. So I can relate to that, going to school, coming back home. It's like, this is different. Where did that coffee shop come from? Or where did this pop up? You just see a bunch of different faces that were not there when you left, and you come back and it's different. Is this film at all semi-autobiographical? Did you pull from your own experiences to put this film out? Was this part of did you pull from your own experience to bring this film to life?
Yeah, I mean, as much as I possibly could,
Right.
I think this, if I said no, there would be 1,000 people who come on here and be like, he lying. Right. And I think that I grew up on Q Street, you know what I'm saying? Like, my family and my friends are in the film. My mother is actually, that's the woman the mother of Mike, that's my mother actually. Yes. It is completely kind of intertwined with, every aspect of my being. I think that it wasn't like that in the beginning. In the beginning, I was trying to keep it separate, but, it was next to impossible. And I think that the more I allowed that to happen, the more I leaned into that idea that it was about me, the more it started to come alive, in a really interesting way. Where are you from, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm from Texas.
All right, cool.
Yeah, I live in LA, but I'm from Texas. Okay. Speaking of your family and your mom in the film, why? Let me ask, do I have an accent?
Yeah, and for a second I was like, he's from DC? Because DC people, they say we sound Southern, but
Y'all do. I thought that too. I was like, a New Orleans, it's a Texas, it's a Southern drawl for real.
It's a thing. It's a thing, for sure.
For sure. Speaking of your mom in the film, this film was comprised of friends and family, right? People that you knew or friends of friends. This film was done on a tight budget. Talk to us about the process in bringing this film to life, gathering these people. What struggles did you face? How were you stretched, and how did you grow from this experience, being that this is your first film?
Well, first off, anybody knows how incredibly expensive it is to make a film, and I think it is prohibitively expensive to the majority of Black people. And I think that for me, it was important to find some way anyway to kind of overcome kind of that aspect of it. And I think that what we found was that what we lacked in money, we made up for in community power. And I think that we were only successful because we were basically able to organize a community, my community, around this idea, the script, the story, that we could tell a story about DC who's down. And everybody's down. We ain't got much money, but we got time, we got hands, we got, elbow grease, and that's kind of all we needed. And I think that it's an incredible testament, and I think it's so interesting because in the way that this George Floyd, explosion has kicked off, or these uprisings have kicked off in the wake of that, everybody has gotten involved with some type of community organizing in one way or another. And it was only at that point I was like, yo, this looks exactly like what we were doing on Residue. And I think that the two kind of, the techniques involved in one are, totally applicable in the other. And so I think that it points to kind of this whole new world of what's possible, for any community who feels that there's a story that they want to tell and put out,
Right.
the possibilities of, available to them, the options available to them, you
Mm-hmm.
know, places that, may not have, the so-called know-how, as long as you have the audacity to say, yo, if they did it, I know I can do it. You know what I mean? I can tell a story. I got a story that I know I can put together. I think that's the first step. The last step is the camera. The last step is, the budget. The last step is, kind of all the Hollywood trappings, you know what I mean, that we
Right.
expect.
Given the climate, like you just spoke about George Floyd, given the climate of our country, do you think this film will aid or help aid in the conversation to enact change?
I hope so. I hope so. I hope, like I hope that this film is grabbed up by
Right.
people embroiled in this battle, because they see some use in it towards that end. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I don't know what will happen, but I can do what I think I've seen my parents do, which is,
Right.
we don't know exactly what will happen, but we know this story is important to us, and we think it'll be important to others, and so we'll just put it out there. My mother
Right.
calls it, some my father calls it fodder. He sees himself as maybe not being the one to kick off, the revolution, but seeing himself as fodder for the generations that will come
Yeah.
after, to use what he leaves behind. My mother, the same thing. You finding a spearhead in the dirt. It's the same kind of thing. You digging for the tools that you need to help you to improve your situation in the world.
Definitely. Residue, the title of the film. What does it mean to you, and how did you arrive at that title?
Let me turn this light real quick.
Okay.
For me, the title is, obviously about what's left behind, kind of what is left behind at the end of the day, once the steamroller has kind of, leveled the whole city, you know what I mean? And how do you pick up those pieces to tell the story of the people who existed there before?
Right.
The story of people who did not have the means, to record their existence in the same way that, white people have,
Right.
especially, I'm in Venice right now, I talk about this a lot. I'm in Venice right now, just seeing in front of you the 1,000-year Roman Empire history, everywhere
Mm-hmm.
you turn, and I know Black people don't have that. Black
Right.
people have some furniture, you know what I'm saying, some debt, you know what I mean, some maybe a couple of letters, some photos,
Right.
you know what I mean, these little small things that like later generations have to kind of sift through. But taken as a whole, taken together, you get an amazing, incredible record of the existence of somebody who was fighting to survive in a completely hostile land. You know what I mean? I think
Mm-hmm.
that like that's the most beautiful kind of way to kind of, regenerate, to recreate someone's life
Right.
story, this residue that they left behind by all means, you know what I mean, as
Right.
they kind of resisted and insisted on, surviving against all odds.
Right. I love it. Merawi, how did Array get involved? And what has this process been like working with this Black, female-led and owned company to put out this film?
I mean, it's been a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Ava is incredible, and I think what she has created is a testament to kind of her tenacity and just her, just genius when it comes to, because that's what she's doing in the film industry. It's not easy for
Right.
Black filmmakers to exist in the film industry. She's not only existing, she's thriving in a way that is allowing, pulling other filmmakers through.
Right.
I talk about how the film was punching above its weight class because it had no money. But if you want to talk about punching above your weight class, there's no bigger weight differential between Array, the
Wow.
small team of revolutionaries, against this massive, multi-billion-dollar industry, which, I think is completely oriented to kind of keep that from happening. You know what I mean? So I just think it's the best place for us to be. I'm so glad they exist. It hurts me to think that no such thing existed in the time of my parents, when,
Mm-hmm.
who are also independent black filmmakers in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, during this kind of, the heyday of the racist, Hollywood film industry. but they exist now. And I see the connection between them and my parents who were, you know, pioneering in that direction. So to me, it's the most blessed kind of, continuity, which I'm glad to be a part of.
Definitely. Residue premieres on Netflix Thursday, the 17th. The story is ready to be told. You've done it. You've premiered it. People love it. You've shared it with the masses. What is your hope when this film is shown in millions of homes and living rooms around the world, when it's shown on phones and computers around the world? What is your hope? What is the message that you hope people leave with?
I mean, one, I hope for Black people, I hope, you know, I want Black people to know it's okay to be angry with what's going on. You know what I mean? It's a righteous anger, which does not need to be suppressed to make anybody feel comfortable. You know what I mean? I think that it's something that needs to be fought back against, and it's okay to fight back for your city, you know, which you helped to build. You know what I mean? And it's not too late. You know, I think that there's, you know, there are victories to be won for Black people, you know, and this is a tide that can be turned. The other thing I would like people to take away is the character of Delante, who's so critical for me. To me, Delante is what I wish for every hood in the country, for every Black community in the country, to have somebody who instinctively questions anybody coming into their community, you know, to so-called tell their story for them,
Right.
You know, assuming that they are voiceless, you know, and I think that like every filmmaker, Black or white or whoever, should be challenged at the doorstep of every community by somebody who says, who are you and what is your, what do you want with us? You know what I mean? Why do you want to tell this story about us? You know? And I think that like that challenge alone would really help to turn the tide against, you know, some of the most racist films that have been made by us. I mean, about us by, you know, white and Black filmmakers since, you know, the beginning of Hollywood's history.
Speaking of filmmakers, what piece of advice would you share with aspiring filmmakers who are up and coming? They're wanting to put out their first project like you just done and have success like you're having. What piece of advice would you give to them?
I would say green light yourself, you know, at all times. At all times, just be wondering, am I waiting for somebody? And why? You know, am I waiting for somebody to give me permission to do this or to give me money to do that? And if so, why am I waiting? And can I do it without that? And really think about the ways that you can overcome all lack of resources, literally anything, you know. And I think that like in one way or another, there's an answer to kind of every, deficit that you find yourself in.
Where is the buzz you said was mine?